quick message before we start this week's podcast. This episode, where we interview Owen Ryan, was recorded about a month ago. Since then, so very sadly, his sister-in-law Lisa Shaw, a well-respected radio presenter and much-loved mum and wife, passed away at the age of just 44. I knew Lisa personally, and she was one of the most lovely, genuine people you could ever wish to meet. So we dedicate this episode in memory of Lisa. Rest in peace. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Failing Writers podcast. This week, we actually have a special guest.
Yeah, somebody who has achieved something in their life.
An actual bona fide writer.
Yeah. And a man that we have all known collectively for about 20 years.
And did the same job as us.
Yep. So, all singing from the same hymn sheet for a change. Although he's just been doing it a lot better than us.
So Owen, better known as his nom de plume, OMJ Ryan, joined us. And I think he had some good little tips for us.
We did. We had a nice chat about character development, his process of writing, and a really awkward review he got from Dave.
Yep.
That Dave thought was anonymous.
Yep.
As it turns out, it wasn't.
I don't.
Yeah, it was quite a harsh review, Dave. What was going through your mind when you wrote it?
I was trying to be helpful through constructive criticism, but it doesn't always come across that way,
Definitely
does it?
one of the highlights of the interview for me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, not for me.
So, enjoy.
Right then. Hello, Owen.
Hello.
I haven't seen you since that strange meeting in a garden centre in Yorkshire several years ago.
And we still talk about that quite a lot. Actually, I was with Gareth last week and we were talking about meeting in a strange garden centre, meeting a strange man.
Weird. Do you know what? I'd been hanging around there for years on the off chance you might show up. And eventually you did.
Well, I used to live around the corner, so, you'd picked your territory quite well.
At least I picked the right garden centre. Otherwise, I'd still be there now.
Well, I once did try and bury during a promotion for the snooker when I was at Hallam, we hid snooker balls around the region and you had to dig them up to win cash. And I buried one not far from there. And I think that's where I realised that I should write crime. Because if you ever try burying a body, it's impossible. If it takes that, it's that hard to get to not be seen burying a small white ball to try and bury a 6-foot person. I don't know how people do it.
Owen, do you remember what the name of the competition was?
It was, it was a play on words. There must have been some.
Balls Deep. Was it Balls Deep?
I think it was Find the Brown.
Oh, right. Well,
yeah. Leave the pink and go for the brown, something like that, I think it was.
Right. Highbrow. You went highbrow
yeah,
there.
Of course,
Yeah,
yeah.
naturally.
Yeah. Anyway, Owen, you are officially our first proper official guest onto the Failing Writers podcast. Which is, it's exciting for us. I would imagine it's even more exciting for you.
Yes, I'm not entirely sure whether I want to class myself as a failing writer, though, as it's now my job.
Well, this is where we try to find out the difference between failing writers and people who actually being successful at it.
Well, I'm not sure I can help, but I'll do what I can.
And in reverence of your appearance on our humble little podcast, Maestro John has taken the liberty of giving you your own introduction music.
No.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes.
Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Here's OMJ Ryan, right about them people dying, or spying, or lying, or trying to solve another crime. He take a page and fills it with thrills, that's his skill. He make up a killer who kills for the thrills, and Phillips will grill all the villains until Ryan be making millions of bills.
That is so good. I need a copy of that. I want to put that on my social media. That's my ringtone. That is so good.
Just put it on your phone and just use that literally as your entrance music wherever you go.
Yep. Walk on.
Just popping down Sainsbury's to get some milk. Hold on a minute.
I'd forgotten how good you are at rapping, actually, John.
Oh, well, You're
the only white rapper I know apart from Eminem.
And Vanilla Ice. Come on, credit where credit's due.
Oh, yeah, don't forget Vanilla.
Was he a rapper? Well, he's just a slow singer.
That's a fine line, isn't it? Fine difference. Hold on a minute. You're not rapping. You're just singing slowly.
That sounds like everybody's dad, doesn't it? That's not rapping. That's slow singing. I was thinking we worked this out the other day, it's about 20 years since we all worked together.
God, it would be, wouldn't it?
Tom and I started in 2001. You were in Manchester by then, I think.
2001, I was in Manchester. Yeah, I started in Leeds in '98. A year later, John appeared, fresh-faced and creative,
just sat there in the creative studio, just rapping,
doing his thing. And then I'd moved to Manchester, and I moved to Sheffield at the end of 2003, I think it was. So I moved into the dirty world of programming in 2003. So
yeah.
And were you writing around that time then, Owen, or not?
Yeah, I wasn't writing books. My first attempt to write was TV shows, and I actually got a meeting with the head of drama and comedy drama at ITV, a guy called David Reynolds, and it was proper old school. It was a strange meeting because it's like these old school boardrooms with mahogany desks and Chesterfields and everything, and this kind of old guy there saying he liked a script I'd put forward called
Monkey Tennis.
It wasn't far off. It's called Shelf Life, and was actually about my life in the supermarket. I'd worked in supermarkets, and funny enough, something called Trolleyed appeared years later, which they must have found my script in a bin because it was remarkably similar and equally shit. So I had the meeting. He said, "I'm about to go and do Frost. David likes me to direct, you see," that being David Jason. "I'll be back in 3 months. Come and see me, and we'll get you to do some scripts." So, because he didn't like the supermarket one, but he was quite happy for me to come and write some stuff for him on spec, and it was great because for every spec script you got $5,000. So I was earning pittance writing ads. I was like, brilliant, $5,000. So I went and went back 3 months later, and they changed absolutely all the structure. Granada had bought YTV, and he was being made to retire. So in my naivety, rather than say, well, who do I speak to in Manchester, I just thought, oh, well, that's my bit done, and I never carried on. So that was my first attempt, and I went away with my tail between my legs, and then started looking at novels quite a bit later, really.
So were you, because in all your different jobs as copywriting and then going into programming and then the big move to Australia, were you always writing something? Or did it get put on the back burner at different times?
I think it got put on the back burner for a little bit. When I was in content management, like the first throes of content management in Newcastle and then Glasgow, I was so stressed out by dealing with presenters who had enormous egos and small talent that, not all of them, I must hasten to add, but there was a couple in each site that really made it very difficult work. I never had the energy to write anything, so when I went to Australia, I got this kind of weird hybrid job which involved writing but for content. And it was there that I started to meet a lot of writers and like-minded people who were, doing writing courses, and there was one in Sydney that caught my eye, which someone in my team was doing, and I thought, I'll give it a go, and that really sparked the journey into doing it properly.
Okay.
And was it the course itself, or was it just the idea that you had got in your head that you were going to do it seriously, if you know what I mean?
It was both, I think. I was desperately... I remember being on holiday before I went to Australia, being on holiday in Greece, and it was coming towards the end of the holiday. I was really stressed out, thinking about going back to work, to all the crap that came with doing that kind of job. And I was just like, oh God, wouldn't it be ace to just be a writer? I was reading something, I can't remember what it was, but I thought, I could do that, and it would be lovely, and to get paid to do this. And that really was the seed. I was writing a book in my head on that holiday, pretty much the whole time. I had a narrator in my head, and writing this book, it wasn't anything particularly special, but at the time it just sort of gave me a bit of hope, and it's always been the hope that I could do it. That's what kept me going when I was doing some pretty difficult meetings and moving people on or whatever it was, or changing structures, all that kind of crap I had to go through. So this was always in the back of my mind. And then when I got to Australia and I went and did a 4-week Unlocking Creativity course at the Writers' Studio, and then really you saw the kind of list of people who've done these, who've done the course and then gone on to become full-time writers. And I was just like, I can do this. So I did the 4-week course, and then I did the first year course, which is the first draft, then the second draft, and then the third draft. So I ended up doing 3 years really working with them, and it was very intense because my job was pretty much a 10 to 12 hour job. I was having to get up at 5 a.m. to do the writing to keep up with the course. Sitting in the dark, well, not in the dark obviously, but getting up in the middle of the night almost sometimes through the Australian winters, which are pretty nasty, even though people think they're not. It was a real commitment, but I just had it in my head I was going to finish this book and it would take me somewhere, and I don't know where that came from, but it's always been sort of right through the middle of me that I was meant to write, and I'd been writing since I was a kid, writing little stories, watching TV shows that I didn't like the ending of. I'd go and rewrite them, or I'd go and draw them differently, do a little storyboard. So it's always been there, and I've just...
I was going to say, so is that was that the main thing that you always wanted to do? Was it your sort of lifetime ambition to be a writer?
I think to be creative, to create... I think more so at the time when I was little, more than to be a writer, it was to create something, to tell stories, whether that be on the page or to create images. I got a graphic design degree, I ended up doing art, mainly because English, the way it was taught at school, was pretty boring and uninspiring. Whereas art was a very free place of, I could go and express myself, and to be honest, a little bit easier. So I was like, oh, sod it, I'll go and do the art. But interestingly, my best scoring project, or whatever assignment when I was at university, was where I matched creative writing with artwork. I told little stories on the page, and it's the best thing I've ever done, and loved it. And I enjoyed the writing probably more than the actual design. So that probably, looking back, was where my brain was going, this is where you're meant to be, mate, But I did learn a lot from the...
words and pictures.
Yeah, totally. And it's always been something... I've got a little storybook here in my office that I found in my cellar, at home. We cleared it out last year. And I must have written it when I was about 7 or 8. And the stories are... for an 8-year-old, are fantastic, and I illustrated them as well. So I was always very keen to bring the whole thing to life.
Oh, in the book that you were writing as part of the course, was that what turned into Media Monster? Or is that something different?
Yes, no, it was. It had many incarnations, and it was inspired by a radio presenter called Kyle Sandilands, who's quite famous in Australia for being quite provocative. And there was a period he went through, he's calmed down a bit since then, but there was a period where he did a lie detector test on air with a 15-year-old girl and her mother, and they asked the question, have you ever had sex? And she was like, no, I haven't. And the girl, Kyle said, that's a lie. The machine tells us it's a lie, and kept pushing her on it. And the girl was going, no, it's not. Jesus. And actually, what came out was a huge scandal, was that she'd been raped.
Jesus Christ.
And he still kept his job. Now, this is, this was 2009, I think, 2010. There was a huge uproar, and they were talking he was suspended and all that. But he came back 2 months later, and admittedly, his act had changed at that point a little bit. And he has mellowed, and I do know people who work with him who say actually underneath he's a bit of a sweetheart. It's kind of his persona, but it really inspired this character of a radio presenter who believes that they're a media mogul, essentially, who's so above the law they can do what they like, and then actually they find themselves in a situation that they can't get out of, and the media suddenly wants them on a stick, and that kind of really inspired what became Media Monster, and then was subsequently developed once I got a publishing deal into Deadly Secret.
So tell us a little bit about that, Owen. What happened with the journey of Media Monster then, in terms of how it got changed or how it got picked up?
Well, I took redundancy in 2018 from my group content director job, and it came at exactly the right time. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever done, because I was walking away from a 6-figure salary. I was doing very well, and money was never an issue. We had a nice... my son had been born in November of 2017. Sadly, my dad passed in March 2018, and then in May or April, I was approached about a restructure within the business I was working in, and I didn't like the look of the restructure. I didn't like the look of what I was going to be doing in it. So I was like, well, actually, is redundancy available? And after a few questions, then it was like, yeah, okay, well, if that's what you want to do. And I'm like, well, I think it is.
So I've always dreamed of a big redundancy payment.
Did you know, I
unfortunately, I've never had a job with a decent salary.
You actually have to be in a job for a decent length of time.
That's what sort of held me back from achieving my dream.
Yeah, that £23.50 you got from the chemist when they let you go, it didn't really go that far.
No, it worked out all right. I mean, I rang my wife. Literally 10 minutes after the meeting, I went outside, or a minute after the meeting, went outside and rang my wife and just said, stand in the sunshine in Leeds, the building down by Yorkshire TV, and I just went, I want out of this. They've given me this, I want out, but I'm terrified because obviously we've got a baby, I've got responsibilities, we've just bought a new house. And she was like, no, do it. do it. And we had a lot more conversations in the month that followed before I finally decided to walk away, because obviously there was a lot to do. But from there, I thought I'll take the summer off. It was the World Cup. It was beautifully sunny. I had the best time. I watched nearly every game of football. I had beers every night. Didn't have to worry about getting up the next day. And I finished Media Monster, which was probably 80% of the way through. And I spent the remaining month, a couple of months of that summer, just tidying it up, or finishing it, then tidying it up, getting it edited, designing the cover, or getting the cover designed, and all the formatting nonsense that goes with trying to get these things online.
And you self-published, yeah?
Yeah, I did it through KDP on Amazon. I went to an Amazon conference and explained how easy it was and how amazing it is. And it's not that easy to do. It is amazing. You can get them out to everyone, but the formatting is quite tricky, which I struggled with. Eventually got it up, sold it mainly through Facebook, did a few ads, and did it to pretty much everyone I know who bought a copy and gratefully read it. And I got fantastic reviews, but I didn't really sell that many, and I think it was maybe 300 or 400 across that summer if I was lucky. And it's difficult to remember the exact numbers because some of it's through page reads and some of it's through downloads. But it wasn't. It was it was really disappointing. It was quite heartbreaking because it was never going to be enough to replace the salary I just said goodbye to. Obviously, I had redundancy money in the bank, but I thought, Jesus, if this is me going to be, this is the money I'm going to make as a writer, we're going to have to go live in a tent. So it really was. It was quite heartbreaking. I pushed and pushed and pushed, and I got to October that year, and I just turned around to my wife and said, I think I'm going to have to get a proper job. I can't risk this. This isn't going to do it for us. And literally, I think it was 4 days later, I got an email on a Friday night, 10 to 5. I've still got it, from Brian Lynch, who's one of the publishing partners at Incubator, who were setting up a digital publishing house in Dublin. He's a TV writer. I think he's either BAFTA nominated or he's won a BAFTA. I can never remember. And Garrett, his partner, was an author and had done very well in the US. So they were setting up and they both worked for Apple in their early years, so they understood algorithms and all that kind of stuff. So they offered me a publishing deal. They said they loved Media Monster. Interesting, they said they love it, thought the story was great, and then they said, we want to change the cover, change the name, and do some quite judicious editing on it. And I was like, Jesus, I'd hate to hear what you think if you didn't like it. So we arranged. I told my wife Kim. She was out and she came in. And I said, look at this. I've got a publishing deal, and she poured pee all over it because she was like, why do you want to give away your royalties? Why do you want to do X, Y, Z? And I was just like, oh, what if they're trying to rip you off? My wife is naturally very cautious around these sort of things, and she just thought maybe that someone was trying to take advantage of me, because there's a lot of shark publishing deals out there, that kind of pay up front and then we'll publish you and all that kind of stuff, which don't work. So I did my due diligence. I went to see the guys in Dublin and was blown away by them and their ability to help develop me as a writer as much as anything. Both being writers, they were happy to sort of work with me on structure and really help me sort of hone my craft. And we signed the first deal for Deadly Secrets with a follow-up for Deadly Silence, and we've been rolling ever since then. And we published Deadly Obsession on the 25th of April, which is this Sunday, depending on when you're listening to this.
Wow. I downloaded it yesterday, Owen.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Through the advanced, copy thingy through Incubator.
Advanced reader copy, yeah. I look forward to hearing what you think.
You're listening to the Failing Writers Podcast. Coming up, more scintillating whiffle waffle and thoroughly erudite chit-chat.
So you were a mere gnat's chuff away from giving it all up.
Yeah, 100%.
That's
yeah.
Owen, what would you have gone and done? What job? What would you be doing?
Well, during the summer, I'd set up
on the bins. Oh,
back to supermarkets. I loved working in the supermarkets. I had the best time working at Asda. I had such a good time. I worked all over: produce, bakery, groceries. I was in everything. Trolleys. It was quite a deflating time because everywhere I looked, I was kind of like, Jesus, I just felt like a bit of a failure. I quit this high-powered job with high-powered, but supposedly high-level job, loads of money, and I've followed my dream to be a writer. That hasn't worked. I'm a great coach, mentor. I'm going to do that. That's not really working. Right, I'll get back into radio. they don't seem to want me back. It was quite a dark time, to be honest, and it didn't.
Yeah, but you know what they say: if you don't fail, you can't come on the Failing Writers podcast. So it swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Well, I certainly qualify for quite a few failures. Although, you know, it's what I've done a lot of reading and a lot of self-help and development, trying to understand, you know, my decisions, the way I work, the way I operate, and, you know, what I'm trying to get out of life. And one of the things you read from very successful people is it's usually when you surrender and you give in and just go, it'll be what'll be, that things suddenly start to happen. And you're trying to get a tight grip on everything, because I was so wound up with I've got to make money, I've got to get this salary back that I left, I've got to, you know, look after Vaughan, my son, I've got to make sure the house is paid for. This just was completely restricting any kind of energy I was putting out. So in the end,
the trouble with that is as well, you're making sure anything you actually do achieve is still a failure.
Yeah.
Because there's no way it's all going to add up to hitting every single one of those self-imposed arbitrary targets, is there? So you're always going to be thinking that you've missed the mark.
Yeah, and that's in my genetics, the way I am. You know, I was brought up by that's not good enough parents. You know, Catholic Irish parents.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, what did you do that for? It never what you did well. It was kind of what you missed out on, and you carry that with you, that narrative, and that's something I've been trying to break, and that cycle. And I'm, you know, even now, I'm lucky I have coaches I work with who support me in that, and you need it to be able to put yourself out there and stick yourself on the out in the public domain. You've got to have belief in what you do, and that's funny. I've never lacked the belief in my writing ability. It's just whether or not it was meant for me. And
I guess that's the thing, because when you were at that point where you'd sold a few hundred books of Media Monster, and you've been doing all this publicity, but at that point, the sales don't necessarily correlate to how good the book is. Do you know what I mean? Because people aren't going to see how good it is until they read it. Was it quite disheartening? Were you desperately struggling around thinking, how the hell can I push this on and sell more books to people who I don't know? What were the other ways to try and get these things out there?
I mean, a lot of it with digital publishing, you're looking at social media, trying to harness that, but that's a dark art in itself. And I went on courses and, you know, SEO and all this kind of stuff, and it's now knowing what I do from my publishers about how the Amazon algorithm works and how difficult it is and how they change it all the time. You either get very, very lucky and hit a sweet spot and it flies, or you get a publishing deal, or you get someone, you know, you have to spend quite a bit of money to promote the books in the first place to get them. Because what you want to do is the Amazon algorithm is to see that people are reading your books, know that it's making money for them, and then the algorithm will carry it for you. And my first two books didn't hit that algorithm. Other writers within the stable were getting that, and they were suddenly finding themselves in a good position. I was going up, and then I was going back down, and that's like, gee, you're like, God, I've got a publishing deal, and I'm still not getting it right. And you know, it's still not working. And it was only really when I released Deadly Vengeance, which was the third in the series, but my fourth book within the Deadlies, that I started to see some consistent numbers, but you still got a tail off. And then I released Deadly Betrayal, which was my last book, and that tail stopped because the algorithm went, oh, actually, this guy's doing all right, we'll keep him up there. And now it sits at a consistent, you know, the books rank consistently. They move a couple of hundred places, you know, daily within the you know, but that's, you know, that's a good position to be in. It's still not where I believe I can be, and it's certainly not where I'm aiming to be. But now, you know, there's an income that is sustainable and it's consistent, and that's been the bit that has been the most frightening, because you go from, you know, a regular paycheck for 30 years to, oh, right, I've got to make my own money, and it's got to come in, and it's all based on what people think of my book. So it is very, very disheartening I think for a lot of writers when you put your stuff out there and you know it's good, and you read other people that you think are just as good as you, but are making a fist of it, you know. And you know, it's really difficult to know what they're doing differently. You just don't know. You just got to try and look after yourself.
Yeah, because was there because going back to when you made the changes from Media Monster, and it turned into this sort of Detective Phillips series. Like, how much of that was you, and how much of that was driven by the publisher? And did it take you? Do you think it took you a while to sort of get your head around the changes and get into that series, if you like?
Not at all. The idea for Jane was mine. Was Jane and the team, and only because I've written Deadly Secrets. She obviously, for the readers that people haven't read it, that's where we get the introduction of Jane Phillips and Bovlino and Jones, the detectives in that. And my thinking was always, you can't bring Marty back for another murder mystery because you're suddenly getting into Jessica Fletcher territory, radio presenter solving crimes. And I was like, as much as I like Murder, She Wrote, I wasn't going to start doing that. So I really I got a lot of feedback on the fact Jane and Bov and Jones were quite, quite chunky characters. So I decided in my own mind that's where I was going to go next with the story. Marty appears in the second, or the first in the series, my second book, is in a cameo role, just to kind of keep some continuity. But it was, in terms of writing the team, I found it much easier than I expected, and I really enjoy writing the team. And the more the series goes on, the easier it is to know what they would say to each other and how they will react to each other. The biggest challenge is the first few chapters of the book, where you're reintroducing them to new readers and trying not to assume that the readers know who they are, and that's quite
yes, because I've noticed that in the bits that I've read, you sort of allude back to other books in the series. I guess that's quite a delicate balance, isn't it? Sort of, because some things in previous books inform what happens in the later books, but you don't necessarily know who's read what or in what order. So how do you balance that?
That is, it's just a very careful walk. I'm keen to make sure the readers know what has happened, but without spoiling anything for them. So there's character development. There's things that happen to characters in each of the books that in the following books you'd need to reference because it's a big part of their life, but you wouldn't necessarily want to go into too much detail. And I'm keen and cautious around cases as well, not to give anything away. So it's quite a trick to do it. And that's not the most difficult. The most difficult is actually reintroducing what the characters look like and sound like at the start of each book without sounding like you're just doing the same old. I'm in the middle. I'm writing chapter 2 at the minute. This today of the next one, and the first, I forget, the first 5 chapters are probably the most difficult because the first 5 and the last 5, because you're reintroducing the audience to it, and then the last 5 you're basically trying to not write it too quickly to get to the end. So it's a fine balance. Try not to finish too quickly.
It's a common problem, isn't it?
Sound advice for life.
If people haven't guessed from the titles of your books, you're a crime thriller writer. But what drew you to that genre, Owen? Are you did you always read mostly thrillers, or
how many people have you murdered, Owen?
Well, if in my latest book, I think it was about 17. Not 17, including my latest book, I think it's probably about 17 or 18 that I've killed off. So, I've always had an interest in... I wasn't a great reader. I didn't enjoy reading at school because I need to read the words and understand it. I need to picture them in my mind, and it makes me quite slow. Wife laughs at me because she can steam through a book, but then she can't remember it 2 days later, whereas I can remember it almost word for word 10 years later. So... I struggled with books that were chewy and long, and then I found Jack Higgins as a kid. My dad used to read them, and they're very well plotted. The early ones, very well plotted, very well written. They're cliched, but then all successful books generally are. And it was his style of moving things quite quickly that got me excited about a certain style of writing. And then I think the crime stuff really came. I'd never set out to write a crime thriller so much as just it fell out of Media Monster come Deadly Secrets, that there was the characters there that I liked and I wanted to work with and wanted to write more, and so I kind of got into crime. And honestly now I'm because one of my advisors is former Crown prosecutor. There's not a lot I don't know about criminal law and how to get away with stuff.
Handy, yeah, very handy.
That's worrying but handy.
On the subject of the characters, your main characters in it, how tricky did you find the line between making them you mentioned about cliches there. Detective fiction is full of it, isn't it? And needs a certain amount of it to be able to move it along and for the readers to be on the same journey. But then obviously you can step too far and all of a sudden you've got yourself a tough, troubled alcoholic savant detective. Do you know what I mean? Before you know where you are, you in that. So how did you find the balance of creating those characters, or did they just organically become themselves and you kind of just hear them?
I think in Silence I probably went quite heavy on cliche. Naturally, you kind of look at it as you want to really pull out a very clear, defined character. Phillips has a classically has a drink problem, but there's a reason for that, and that's obviously what came out of Deadly Secrets. She was severely injured in that, and so she's coping with it, and that side of it, I guess it's cliche, but it's also quite true, because even in my radio career, I've worked with people who suffered with severe stress and have dealt with it with alcohol or drugs, or so all of my characters are quite real. I think I turn the volume up. It's funny because in Silence there's a couple of characters who were based on real people, and some of the reviews that I got around them were that they weren't realistic, they were too unpleasant. And I was like, well, not if you work in the radio industry, they're quite real. And in fact, when we were moving from Media Monster to Deadly Secrets, my publisher said, we're a bit concerned about Marty sitting at home and snorting loads of cocaine in his lounge when he gets suspended. He's said, it doesn't seem realistic. And I was like,
oh really?
Here's a list of names of people. Just go and look. I can tell you now, I've seen them do it.
The only question there, why is it not realistic? Which room do you think they should be doing it in?
Yeah, exactly. So we moved to the kitchen, shall we? So we made him, into his whiskey rather than that. And I think once I got into Waters and as I moved through, the characters are kind of turned down. The fights are a bit more subtle. The arguments are a bit more. It's just a craft. It's just learning, and you take the feedback on board. But I mean, they still read well and they still rate well, the first books. But I think they're just I think I'm more subtle in how I develop the characters now.
I just think it's really interesting because you do need that certain amount of stereotypical, something that's going to resonate quickly with the reader. I guess what you're saying is if you can take it another step deeper underneath, then it stops being a cliche and becomes a real reason around the character. Yeah,
every single character has issues, or any issues that they have, we try and pull them out in a realistic way. And having worked in an industry with some delicate people and lots of people, and managed lots of people with all kinds of issues going on in the background, there are lots of commonality in how life affects people, and it's just bringing that in. And also there's a certain sense of morality in every one of the stories about society or situations or people have created these monsters rather than they were born that way, and I think that's really important to try and get that across as well, because there is a hope in reading that you're entertained, but also you might go, God, I've got a dickhead boss like that as well, and usually the dickhead bosses don't always win, although you have to read a few of the books for that to come through.
What's your favourite bit of writing? Your
favourite
favourite moment. Yeah, what's your favourite word? No, what's your favourite moment? Is it the starting a new book? Is it sort of when you feel like you've cracked it, or is it literally putting down your laptop and going, I've done it?
Yeah, it's the end. It's the bit where I come out of my office, walk out, find Kim, and go, boom, done. And I usually say something like that. But I think that you go through stages in the writing process, because the planning is quite arduous. And then when you start writing, the first chapter is terrifying because you think, God, I can't do this again. Can I do this again? You get that one out of the way. It's a bit of a high. Yesterday I finished chapter 1. I normally do more than one. I do 2 or 3 chapters a day, but yesterday I only got 1 out because it was the first and it's quite tricky. But I felt quite buoyant yesterday. Then this morning I felt a bit flat again because I'm like, oh God, I've got to do it again. And then you start working your way through it, and these are the tricky kind of descriptive chapters of the characters. And then you get into your flow, and I'd say the next 10 chapters are really exciting because you're like, oh, this is brilliant. And then you start to look, and I've got the list of chapters, and I know how long it's going to be, and I'm like, and you get to the sort of up towards the middle, you're like, oh God, this is hard. I can't keep doing this. Then once you tip over the top, you start to think, I'm getting there. And then the final 10 chapters are really exciting because you're kind of bringing the whole thing to a crescendo. And the big challenge is trying not to, no pun intended, finish too early. You've got to try and draw the tension out rather than just being a desperate, desire to just finish the bloody thing. It's a roller coaster. You go up and down, up and down, up and down. But it's amazing. And I'm high as a kite when I'm writing. I'm always thinking about the story and how it can develop.
Oh, and have you always written in that framework of being a thorough planner writing out what happens in the chapters and then going at it from chapter 1 to chapter X?
No, not really. Well, initially no, but when I went to work or study at the writer's studio, that was very structure based.
Yeah.
But not to the degree. This writing method I use now is what they use in TV. It's called the beat sheet, where you work out the beats of the story, and then you break it down into acts: Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then I then break it down into chapters.
Yeah.
And when we get into chapters, we can start to see where things are. There's too many chapters are too samey, or we need to work things out. So I mean, all the ideas are mine. All the work that goes into the planning is pretty much at my end. But I have consultants that I chuck it through to, who have a look at it, and with a critical eye will go, that sequence of chapters is probably, you could lose that one. You don't need it. And then, so by the time I get the sort of sign off to write, I'm really clear on what each chapter has going on, and I just then look at it in my head, watch it play out like a video, and I just describe what I'm seeing.
And how detailed is the plan?
Is it longer than the book?
It's about, I think normally it's about 10,000 words worth of planning.
Right.
It's great to do it that way because it's a pain in the arse to do. It takes about a month, and it's almost as painful as the editing. But once you start writing, it just gives you the freedom because you know where you're going, so you're not restrained by, will this work? You've already worked it out.
So you say it takes about a month to do the planning. How long from that sort of initial concept to handing in your draft, roughly, does it take you? And has that sort of got shorter as you've gone on through the series?
Yes, it has. I always laugh. The first book took me 10 years. The second one took me, I think it was 3 months. And my last book took me a while because it was split over Christmas, but Deadly Betrayal I wrote in 5 weeks and a day. From sit down, I've got the chapters ready, let's go. But I've developed a new writing method, which I know a lot of writers use. I've actually got it from a writer. I've got it from a guy called Jim Quick, who's a brain expert, who talks about how long you can do something before your brain starts to deteriorate in terms of quality. So I work in half-hour blocks. I do 30 minutes, a 5-minute break, 30 minutes, 5-minute break, and I'm very strict on that.
That's interesting.
And
Dave, you work with the opposite, don't you?
Yeah.
5 minutes
work.
on,
day off.
Yeah, a couple of weeks. That's interesting. That, yeah. So just like proper bursts, like doing it in bursts.
Yeah, I am quite disciplined anyway in how I work and how I write. I can't just sit there and I've got to have I'm very target driven, or not target driven, not so much achievement driven. It's kind of like I want to do X amount, feel like I've achieved, and then I can sit down and relax at the end of the day. So I'm not good between books. I get lost because I don't have anything to focus on, or anything to occupy my mind. So I'm not great. So
it's interesting because I remember you being like that back at Galaxy. You always sort of very much, right, this is the target, this is what we've got to achieve. That's what we work towards. So has that sort of come in handy, do you think, in terms of being disciplined enough to do this as a day job?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're writing commercials, you've got to get so much done within a certain time frame, and you've got to do it obviously within a deadline to meet the meeting, and then get back and tidy up and be quite organised. I think I've always been quite organised in my work life, and I think that's just something I carry through. And I like to get the books done as quickly as I can within reason of not degrading the quality, because it's you've got a momentum, then you've got an energy. Whereas if you sort of meander and do a couple of days here, and I might do a day next week, because I took a break over Christmas, and so I was away from it for about 3 weeks, and coming back to it with that gap was really tricky. Probably took me another week to get my head back into the right zone. Whereas if you start and you just keep going, you're just immersed in the story, and it's really the energy is very, very different. It's quite exciting to write.
It's interesting because we've been talking in previous episodes about getting into that sort of zone, and if you can just do something every day, it helps you to stay in it.
Yeah, they do say that if you want to write, you should write every day. If you're going to be a writer, you need to write something every day. Not necessarily on the weekends, but I write Monday to Friday.
Yeah,
always something.
Are there any books in your head, Owen, that you like to write that aren't part of the same series? Or you just don't have time to think about that because you're currently in this?
Funny enough, I've got, like most parents, I've got a children's book having and it came to me. It's an idea that came to me in a dream, bizarrely, when I was in Manchester, and I got up that next morning and stuck it on an email to myself and was like, right, I've just got to get this down. And it's Henrik and the Magic Satchel, this guy who goes off and disappears into the satchel and goes and sees various things around the world with his granddad and all this kind of stuff. So that was always in my mind to create something like that. But
digging up snooker balls.
Yeah, exactly. Digging up balls. No, that kind of, that's probably, it's still in the back of my mind. But I think children's publishing is more cutthroat and more difficult than anything else. I've thought about, in terms of grown-up writing, I'm thinking, how long can I sustain DCI Phillips and the rest of the team? But then you look at someone like Peter James, I think he's releasing his 19th book in the Grey series, and Harry Bosch series goes on and on and on. You kind of think, well, there's no reason, if people love them, it's only really writers, I think, that get tired of stories, and that's...
Yeah, Terry Pratchett always used to say, if you've got something that works, then just stick with it. If you've got something that works and you're free within that to do the things that you want to do, then why change it?
Yeah, and I think it's the writer's ego of like, I should be doing something different because people are going to say I'm old hat, and if you are still writing and people are still reading them, then I don't think there's any reason you should stop. But equally, I have thought, would I do a psychological thriller? Is there something in that I would do? At the minute, I'm just really enjoying Jane and the team, and I feel for my stablemates who write psychological thrillers and have to start every book with a new set of characters and a new introduction, and everything is from scratch. I mean, it's exhausting. At least I know what Bob's going to do when he walks in the room, what he's going to look like, how he's going to eat a sandwich, and what Jones is going to say to him, and how Phillips will react to Fox. And there's a new character in the new book as well, who replaces Fox as Jane's boss. So that was quite fun bringing him in. It's I think I'll just keep going, and maybe when I'm sat on my yacht and the sun's shining and I get a bit of inspiration, I might write something that no one wants to read.
Oh, and there's going to be one book that you start in this series where you're just going to start it thinking, do you know what? I think Jane's going to have to die in this one.
Well, I did discuss killing a character off with my publisher the other week, and his reaction was quite priceless, because he just was sort of like, what? It's like, don't mess with the formula. We're just getting it cracking now.
Don't rock the boat.
But I did promise him that if I do that, the character will be around for a few books yet. But I was, I don't want to. I think for it to live long, there will have to be some critical changes at key periods to just shake it up. Otherwise, it will become a bit same old.
We were going to ask you, Owen, what do you think makes the perfect opening to a crime thriller? Because we were going to have a little go ourselves, and for maybe next week's podcast, just write the opening of a crime thriller. So give us some pointers.
Well, this is my personal take on it: is get to the scare pretty quickly. For me, it's a lot of the feedback I get for my books is you're straight into the meat of the drama. There's I don't know, there's a lot of writers who spend 2-3 chapters developing the character of the main character, the main detective or whatever, and just going over and over and over that. And I think you can bring that through in that comes through in the story. So get to the meat of it. I always like to just pretty much have the kill almost on the first page, if not the second or third page, the first one. So that's it for me.
Yeah.
A sense of foreboding, either someone watching or someone. Something is coming and you're just waiting to find out what it is, and then always try and make the first kill a bit of a surprise.
Yeah,
kill them early. That's my take on it.
Kill them early.
I definitely think we should have a go at that, and perhaps we could get Owen to judge them.
I'd love to judge them for you.
This is the Failing Writers Podcast, and coming up next, slightly more of the Failing Writers Podcast. How lovely for you.
How do you find, we mentioned before about the reviews side of things. How do you find the reviews when you just got these anonymous people saying good things or bad things?
In the main, they're pretty positive. Occasionally, you'll get someone who'll stick one to you, and it's that becomes even more difficult if you know the person. I remember getting a review once from someone who I was, I thought I was really good friends with, and Jesus, they hated everything. It's like they hated the dialogue, they thought the characters lacked depth, and I remember this line about them saying that I had an unhealthy fixation with people losing coats.
Who would do that kind of thing?
I know, seriously.
Well, I don't know. What sort of person would say something like that?
To me, it sounded like a frustrated writer who wasn't happy with what they were putting out. So
that does sound
they,
like that.
They took it all out on me.
In the defence of whatever person it was that wrote that, whoever that horrible human being was, sometimes you have to consider that the box that you get to write the reviews in are quite small, and it's difficult to try and get across what you hope is constructive criticism in a way that doesn't make you sound like a bastard.
Yeah.
Having said that, Owen, I do want to know whether you do have an unhealthy obsession with people removing their outer garments, their coats. It just seems very specific for you to deny it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Over here, Gov.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's,
Not pretty, is it, Detective?
now you found her.
Yep. Poor thing.
Right, well, we need to find out how it happened, don't we?
Well, sorry, sir, but it seems pretty, I mean, there's the axe.
Just look at this zip.
Zip, sir?
On a coat.
Not the coat thing again, Gov.
It's undone. That's a clue.
She's got an axe in her head, sir. In her head. Well, at least halfway through her head, actually.
Yep, reckon that's the clue right there, sir. The axe.
I've been doing this job long enough to... Oh, look here. One arm out with a coat. A coat is half on and half off.
So?
That might be what killed her.
I think it's probably the axe.
The head axe? Yeah, I think the axe too.
The coat. It's always about the coats, I tell you. Take your coat off.
What?
Take your coat off. I'm taking mine off. Look, everyone, take your coats off.
It's a bit chilly.
Coats off, and that's an order.
Well, I don't have a coat, sir.
What?
Well, I haven't, I don't really wear coats.
Right. Johnson,
Yes, sir.
pass me the axe.
Oh, Christ.
So thank you very much for joining us, Owen, being our first ever guest. So far, you're probably the best guest we've ever had.
Oh, right. Thank you. That's some achievement. I always want to be number one.
Yeah,
Number one.
well, for the time being, we'll guarantee you that number one slot.
Sweet. It's a good omen for my new book coming
Do
out.
you want to give it a plug? Not that anyone's listening, but,
Yeah, go to Amazon and look up for OMJ Ryan. You'll find the Deadly series there with Detective James Phillips, starting with Deadly Silence. Then we got Deadly Waters, Deadly Vengeance, Deadly Betrayal, and now, as of the 25th of April, Deadly Obsession, which is about a serial killer obsessed with historical serial killers. So it's fiction brought together with real life serial killers.
If anyone wants to be inspired, by the way, then you could do worse than have a read of Owen's blog, which is very motivational. We covered some of it, but it's very nicely written bit of.
And where could people find that if they did want to have a look at it?
That's at my website, omjryan.com, and just look for blogs. You'll find the Taylor Swift one, which is from Taylor Swift to Swift Exit, which talks about why I quit and why I decided to get into writing. And then the other ones will follow in the next 6 months, I hope.
Super duper.
Nice one.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Owen.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think it's lovely to see your faces, and it's been quite therapeutic for me to finally face my demons and my biggest, harshest critic.
biggest critic.
Birdie.
It's your own stupid fault, Owen, isn't it, with your coat fetish? Drop the coat fetish, no one's got a problem with you. Do you know what I mean? It's up to you.
You guys are legends. Thanks very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
man.
Owen.
See you, all three of you as well.
Cheers, Owen. Take
Lovely
care, mate.
hanging with you, buddy. See you later.
Oh, that was nice, wasn't it? We've had a guest on.
It was a bona fide guest, and we asked him questions, and he
Yeah.
answered questions, and I think we all learned something.
Oh. Well, I think we should do that though. We should have a go. Now we've learnt how to write crime fiction. We should do that. We should write a page of it ourselves.
Yes.
We should give it a go. I reckon we could do that, couldn't we?
What, like like the start of a crime fiction novel?
Just like the first
Yeah.
page or so, the opening bit that's gonna the bit that really gets you into it, that makes you
Okay,
want to read the
yeah,
rest of the
yeah.
book.
The first page of our best-selling crime detective murder mystery novel.
Yeah, and I reckon we should put it out there on Twitter and everything as well, and get people, the thousands of listeners, to send. I know it'll be an unmanageable amount of stuff we'll get in because.
Yeah, we won't be able to read it all, but we should make that clear now.
Anyone out there who wants to send us a page, look on Twitter for the Failing Writers, and then just send us a page of your murder mystery. The first page, probably.
Yeah.
Not one from the middle. That wouldn't make much sense, would it?
Yeah, so if you send it to failingwriterspodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
So are we going to write these like we're writing a crime thriller for real, or are we going to just try and make each other laugh? I need to know this before I start writing.
Do you know what?
I think
It's
this
quite
one's
an
gonna be-
important question now.
This is for reals.
Okay, good.
I think we should do it for, like, as though, what would be the opening of, if you were writing a detective or some sort of murder thriller, how would it start?
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it properly. One page of A4?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Like it.
I'll go and have a long, hard look at myself. And
Give yourself a review, Dave.
I will.
Good
And
idea.
it won't be a positive one.
Take your coat off, sit down, and give yourself a review.
Yeah.
We've had a nightmare, boss. We found a dead body in a coat factory. There's coats everywhere.
Hello.
Where's everybody gone?